June 1944, Saipan Island. A United States Marine crouches inside what looks like a metal bathtub with tracks. Water pours through bullet holes in the thin armor around him. The engine roars. Waves crash over the bow. He's still half a mile from the beach, moving at 4 miles per hour through open ocean, completely exposed. The Japanese are already firing. This floating coffin shouldn't work. Every engineer who first saw the blueprints said it was impossible. Yet over the next 2 years, this ridiculous machine would touch the shores of 54 islands, and it would rewrite the entire doctrine of amphibious warfare. But it had one fatal flaw that would cost thousands of lives before anyone admitted the truth. The problem began in 1937, not with generals or admirals, with a Florida swamp. Donald Roebling was a millionaire, heir to the Roebling fortune, the family that built the Brooklyn Bridge. He didn't need to work. He certainly didn't need to build experimental vehicles. But he'd become obsessed with a humanitarian problem. Every hurricane season, people stranded in the Florida Everglades drowned before rescue crews could reach them. Airboats couldn't navigate the dense vegetation. Wheeled vehicles sank into the muck. So Roebling started sketching something that seemed insane. A boat that could drive on land. An armored vehicle that could swim. By 1935, he'd built his first prototype, the Alligator. It looked like someone had welded a rowboat to a tractor, but it worked. Sort of. It crawled through swamps at 7 miles per hour on land, 3 in water. The aluminum hull kept it afloat. The tracks, borrowed from tank suspension systems, clawed through mud that would swallow a truck whole. Then, Life magazine published photos. The United States Marine Corps saw those images and understood something the Navy didn't. Every amphibious assault in history had died in the same place. The gap, that terrible stretch of water between where the landing craft stopped and where the beach began. Men waded through chest-deep surf, weighed down by 60 pounds of equipment, while machine guns cut them down like wheat. At Gallipoli, in 1915, the Ottomans had turned the Dardanelles red. Entire battalions drowned before firing a shot. The Marines needed to cross that gap without stopping. They needed a vehicle that could drive from ship to shore without pause, without that vulnerable moment when men climbed out of boats into killing zones. They wrote to Donald Roebling. He refused. He was building rescue vehicles, not weapons of war. They wrote again. He refused again. Then Admiral Holland Smith himself visited Roebling's Florida estate. The conversation lasted 6 hours. Nobody knows exactly what Smith said, but Roebling changed his mind. 1940. The first military prototype emerged from Roebling's private workshop. The Alligator had evolved. The aluminum hull was gone, replaced by welded steel plates. The tracks were wider, deeper, designed to paddle through surf. The cargo bay could hold 20 combat-equipped Marines or 4,000 pounds of supplies. Top speed remained pathetically slow. 4.5 miles per hour in water. 25 on land if you were lucky, and the ground was flat. The Marine Corps tested it at Culebra Island, watched it crawl out of the Caribbean and up onto the beach without stopping, watched it navigate reefs that would gut a normal landing craft, watched it climb coral shelves that would snap a propeller. They ordered 100 immediately. Then, December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor burned. The world changed overnight. The LVT program went from experimental to critical. Food Machinery Corporation took over production. The factory in Lakeland, Florida, started running 3 shifts. The basic Alligator transformed into the LVT1, then the LVT2 with a new suspension, the LVT3 with a different engine, the LVT4 with a rear ramp so vehicles could unload faster. But every version shared the same fundamental design: a rectangular steel hull, open top, tracks that doubled as paddles with metal cleats that scooped water, a continental radial engine that screamed at 4,000 revolutions per minute just to push the thing through waves, and armor that was barely armor at all, 3/8 of an inch on the hull, 1/2 an inch maximum on the cab, enough to stop rifle rounds? Maybe. Definitely not enough to stop a 50 caliber machine gun. Absolutely useless against anything larger. Before we go on, if forgotten and impossible war machines fascinate you, subscribe to Forgotten War Relics and hit the bell so you never miss one. The crews called them Amtraks, or water buffaloes, or, less charitably, coffins, because that's what they looked like from the inside. A rectangular steel box, open to the sky, moving at walking speed through water while every gun on the beach are aimed at you. The driver sat in a forward compartment with vision slits so narrow he could barely see. The engine sat in the middle, roaring loud enough to make communication impossible. 20 Marines crammed into the rear, sitting on bench seats, unable to see where they were going, unable to do anything except wait and pray the machine didn't sink. And they did sink, constantly. Combat damage, mechanical failure, overloading, rough seas. The LVT had positive buoyancy when everything worked perfectly. But perfect was rare. Water sloshed in through the open top. Bullets punched through the thin hull. Coral tore at the tracks. By 1944, the Corps had added pumps. By 1945, they'd added armor kits. By the end of the war, they'd built 18,500 of these machines. 18,000? More than the total production of German Panther tanks. More than Soviet IS-2s. More than American Hellcats. The LVT wasn't the most powerful armored vehicle of World War II. It wasn't the fastest or the best protected, but it might have been the most important. Because in the Pacific, every battle started in the water. The first real test came at Tarawa, November 1943, a tiny atoll in the Gilbert Islands, barely 2 miles long. The plan looked simple on paper: naval bombardment, airstrikes. Then the 2nd Marine Division would land on the beaches in standard Higgins boats, secure the island in 3 days. The Marines had 125 LVTs. They were supposed to carry the first waves across the reef, then return to shuttle supplies. Nobody expected them to be critical. Then the tide didn't come in. The reef at Tarawa sat 3 to 5 feet below the surface at low tide. Higgins boats drew 4 feet. They grounded on the coral, hundreds of yards from shore. Marines climbed out and waded through chest-deep water while Japanese machine guns cut them down. Entire companies were destroyed before reaching the beach. But the LVTs kept going. Their tracks found purchase on the coral. They crawled over the reef, pushed through the lagoon, climbed onto the beach. The machines that made it delivered their Marines alive. The machines that didn't became tombs in the surf. 75% casualties in some units. Over 1,000 Marines dead in 76 hours. But the Corps learned something. You couldn't take a Pacific island without amphibious tractors. At Saipan, they brought 700 LVTs. At Peleliu, 500. At Iwo Jima, more than 800. The production lines at Food Machinery Corporation and Borg Warner worked around the clock. New variants appeared every few months. The LVT-2 had a rear ramp for faster unloading. The LVT-3 had twin Cadillac engines for better reliability. The LVT-4 had the engine forward so the cargo bay opened to the sea. Then came the armored versions. The LVT-A1 mounted a 37mm gun in a turret salvaged from the Stuart light tank. The LVT-A4 carried a 75mm howitzer. They didn't have the armor to survive direct hits. They weren't supposed to. They were mobile fire support. They'd hit the beach ahead of the troop carriers, suppress the bunkers and pillboxes, clear a path inland. At Okinawa, they formed entire armored battalions. The numbers tell the story. Across the Pacific Campaign, LVTs landed on 54 islands. They delivered more than 500,000 troops to hostile shores. They evacuated tens of thousands of wounded under fire. They hauled ammunition, fuel supplies, artillery pieces, entire field hospitals from ship to shore and back again. They also burned. The gasoline engines ignited when hit. The ammunition cooked off. The crews had no escape hatches in early models. Later versions added side doors, but they didn't help much. When an LVT died, it usually took everyone inside with it. Yet the crews kept volunteering. They painted names on the hulls: Alligator Queen, Iron Coffin, Hell on Tracks. They knew the machines were death traps. They climbed in anyway, because the Marines in the back needed to reach that beach. And nothing else could get them there. The Japanese called them kame, turtles, slow, clumsy, impossible to stop. They adapted their tactics. They let the LVTs cross the reef, let them reach the beach, then opened fire at point-blank range. They dug tank traps and strung cables to snag the tracks. They planted mines in the surf and stationed suicide swimmers with magnetic charges. None of it mattered. The LVTs kept coming. After the war, most were scrapped, obsolete, purpose-built for a conflict that was over. The Marines kept some for training. Other nations bought a few hundred. The design influenced Cold War amphibious vehicles. The Soviet BTR series, the British Stolly, the American LVTP-7, but the original Alligator is mostly forgotten now. You'll find a few in museums. Restored, painted, sitting behind velvet ropes. They look absurd. A boat with tracks. A tank that can't fight. A compromised machine that shouldn't have worked. Yet they won the Pacific. Not with firepower, not with armor, but with the simple ability to carry men from ship to shore and keep most of them alive long enough to fight. In the largest amphibious campaign in human history, across thousands of miles of ocean and dozens of fortified islands, that was enough. The crews were right about one thing. They did look like coffins, but they were coffins that moved. And in the Pacific War, mobility mattered more than steel. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to Forgotten War Relics for more of the strangest machines history forgot.